Okay, everybody, I would like to introduce our speakers to you. We have Mony right here and Alberto right there. I'm just going to read what they sent me to say about them, and they can add to this or if they like. Mony is an Ottawa native who is also a pilgrim, seeker, and author who abandoned a lucrative marketing career in the software industry to embark on a search for self. In her personal quests, she climbed the path to Machu Picchu, meditated atop the Great Pyramid of Giza, and walked the 800-kilometer Path of St. James, also known as the Camino in northern Spain. And possibly the greatest adventure of her life, a 5,000-kilometer, 13-country, 13-month walking pilgrimage for peace from Rome to Jerusalem with her now husband, Alberto. Alberto is a native of Cadiz in southern Spain. He is also a pilgrim on life's journey who expresses his relationship with the divine through his paintings, illustrations, sculptures, and writings. He set aside his natural abilities to follow the responsible path of working in the secure and well-paying insurance industry in Spain. The unexpected death of a childhood friend underscored for him the importance of living life without fear. His subsequent decision to abandon his job and pursue his dreams would eventually lead him to the Camino, where he would fatefully meet Mony for one day in a town called Finisterre, whose name literally means the end of the world. They are here to share with us their journey and the many life's lessons it has offered them. So please welcome Mony and Alberto.
That's okay. Well, thank you so much, Ellen, and our thanks to all of you for the invitation to come here and share the story of our journey, our 5,000-kilometer walk that we did for peace, starting in Rome and ending in Jerusalem. I'm going to get the slideshow going. You have in your hands a copy of the map, this map here, the route, which shows the route that we actually walked. And as we are speaking, we're just going to have some photos running on the screen over here from the journey itself. So if you get tired of looking at me, you can look at some of the photos and get a sense of what we looked like and what this life-changing adventure was all about. So the route, in chronological order, starting in Italy. And so the route started actually in Rome, and I'll explain why we chose, why Rome and why Jerusalem. We began in Rome and went north through Italy, up towards Venice. Then we cut down the other side of the Adriatic coast in what was the former Yugoslavia. So Slovenia, Croatia, a little bit of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And then we cut down into Macedonia and then started to head east. Albania, Greece. And then once we reached the Turkish border, we had to make a decision as to whether we wanted to cut through the country or go along the coastline. And since it was summer, we were told that the distances, if you go through the center, the distances between towns is very long. And there's very few possibilities for shelter or even water. And so we made the decision instead to go along the coastline, little realizing how long that Turkish coastline really is. It took us over 4 months to actually finish the Turkish coastline. And we needed to leave. That's why you see that little blip that goes into Cyprus. We had to leave the country because our 3-month visa had expired. And we needed to leave the country and re-enter again to be able to get another renewal of our visa for 3 more months. And back in 2001, which was when we did this, we started in 2001, we finished in 2002, the situation in the Middle East wasn't as tense. It was right after 9/11. Things were unstable, of course, but we felt fairly safe to be able to continue our walk from Turkey down towards Syria, following the coastline the whole time, down into Lebanon, which is where my parents are from. And from Lebanon, hoping to cross into Israel on foot, but that was the only border we physically were unable to cross on foot. And it's funny, it's not because the Israelis would not let us enter, but because the Lebanese wouldn't let us leave. And we couldn't understand that logic. But okay, we were not allowed to leave, and they said the border was physically closed with landmines. It was too dangerous. So in that case, they said you could walk all the way over into Jordan and come in from the other side into Palestine. And by then we were so tired. It was over a year of walking, and Jerusalem was right there. So we just didn't have it in us to continue walking anymore. And so we decided to take a flight to Cyprus again, come into Tel Aviv, and from Tel Aviv we took a train to the northernmost city, which is Haifa, and from Haifa we finished walking all the way to Jerusalem. It took us just over 400 days, basically 400 days, just 5,000 kilometers. So that's the physical aspect of it. We didn't have any sponsors when we did this, I should mention. We didn't belong to any kind of an association or a group, be it like religious or political or social. And it certainly wasn't organized. Many people plan this kind of a journey. They spend years planning their route and where they're going to stay. And in our case, we didn't do anything like that. It was an idea that you can say was inspired, and it really felt like a calling to go on this kind of a pilgrimage. And the story really kind of begins with me. I'm an Ottawa native, as Ellen so kindly stated. And I had what you would call, a normal life. I was married, and I had the job, and I had the career, and I had all those great things. But I kind of fell into an existential crisis. That moment in, I think, the lives of so many people where you say, is this really all that there is to my life? Surely there has to be more to life than simply selling software and going around and speaking about the benefits of that. And so that kind of questing began. The collapse of my marriage at the time also added to that fuel, to that fire of what is the meaning of your life. And, I went to traditional therapy and psychologists, and all that was really good, but I still felt that there was something missing. And eventually that quest led me into the spiritual terrain. And I could say I spent most of my weekends and free time at the chapters in the self-help and personal development and esoteric section, trying to fill the void that I felt that was there. And I learned a great deal. And it seemed to really open my mind to concepts I'd never heard before, such as, I was a spiritual being on a physical journey. That in itself was a revelation that I had a spirit. Because I grew up in a home, even though my family, I was baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church, never really went to church, never practiced. It wasn't a part of our family. So I grew up without any kind of a spiritual base or foundation to turn to. And so to realize that I was a spiritual being on a physical journey was a great revelation to me. The fact that I was a creator of my world, not its victim, that was a big one. And the thing that absolutely changed my life was knowing that if I wanted to change the world on the outside, I needed to first begin by changing my thoughts and perceptions about that world on the inside. That change begins within. And that was really the catalyst that I think got the rest of the story moving forward. I was still working for full time. I was trying to be all this person that all these books promised you could be. Somebody who was open and trusting and could just let go of their life and trust that everything is going to be okay, that people are innately good. All these great things that you learn in these books. And I was committed to that. I was committed to, okay, I'm going to embark on this journey. I'm going to reveal my fears. I'm going to do the healing work. And eventually I just found it too difficult. I just could not continue doing the work of being at work and all the demands of that and really committing to the person that was emerging. And so I made the decision to just quit my job. I threw on a backpack and I started to travel. And my travels took me from Egypt in the beginning, hence the meditation in the pyramids. I went to Egypt, throughout Europe, and eventually found myself on the Camino. Has anybody here walked the Camino or is familiar with the Camino? You've heard of it? Yes, it's a very ancient 800-kilometer pilgrimage route along northern Spain. And I did that walk, and at the end of that walk, in Finisterre, as Ellen mentioned, in a town that literally means the end of the world, I met a Spanish pilgrim named Alberto. And he'll tell you his story.
Hello, I am Alberto. I don't speak so well English like her, then I'm going to try to do the best that I can. I was born in Cadiz, in the south of Spain, in a Catholic religion background. My mother, she was very, very religious and still is, thanks God. And from the very beginning, the first idea I think my mother was really helpful in that is that I wanted to be a priest. I grew with the idea that God is love. Well, in first place that there is a God, no? That there is something that loves us so much, and well, after Jesus is the way, and the Virgin Mary. But she present to me like the best friends that I could have. Mary like the second mother or the first mother that I could have. Like God was essentially love. With the years, this idea changed when I was maturing, and I think, but I always appreciate the fact that I grow with that belief, because I feel a lot of protection. I feel, when I was a child even, I feel the love. I feel that I could talk with that amazing thing that love us so much. I feel that I could see even miracles everywhere. But with maturity, when I went to high school, I went even to a seminar to study in high school. I was resident in a seminary for boys that after they want to do. I had my experience with priest and with religion started to have some problems. I started to doubt because my first question was: is God is love, or this thing amazing that has created everything is love? Why we are going to hell if we don't obey Him? What kind of love is that? You know, if I had a child, I don't know. I never could send to him to a place like that. You know, if he doesn't do what I say, and many things that you start to doubt about, and especially to the fact that God is so almighty, so powerful. Why people suffer? Why He doesn't change things by the way? It's so magical things. Then all these doubts, even when I didn't want to mention, because if you start to think in this, you go to hell even faster. No? But they were in my background. They were in my mind. And finally, with time, I lost that connection. I could say. But with the death of my friend, how Ellen had explained before, I was 24 years. My best friend Javi died in a accident in his work. He fell from he was working. That was for me a call of attention. That I say I cannot live my life without a meaning. I can die tomorrow. What I am doing? I'm working in an insurance company. I am trying to succeed. I must to do what I really feel, what I love. That at that time was my art. I love it to draw. I love it to paint. But I didn't believe that I could do nothing with that. But when the death of my brother, in some way, my friend Javi, I felt that I needed to do something with my life, because it's not. I will be a life without meaning. That idea was very deep in my mind, even when still I had not found another different spirituality. That came after. Years after, I continued still in the insurance company for many years, but I was not happy. I went there for a while trying to save some money and to follow my dream of to become an artist but I didn't have time. I didn't have time with my work. Was many hours a day. I had a girlfriend for many years. We had buy a house. We had so many. I couldn't find the time to dedicate to what I really loved. That was the thing that put me very, very down. And in some way, I felt that I was not committed to the promise that I did to my friend when he died. That I will live a life with meaning. I will have no fear. I will try to do something else. At that point, I was so bad. I say, I don't care anymore. I cannot live more in this way. If I lost my job, if I love everything, if I love my wife, I prefer that to live in this way. I prefer to die than to live a unhappy life, And then I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to leave my work. Or I don't come back to this office anymore. And just when I thought in that, And I say, I don't know what I'm going to do, but this summer, these holidays that I'm going to have in this summer, I'm going to make a decision that is sure I'm not going to come back to the office. When I did that, just in that summer, when I less expected, a book caught my attention in the shell of my mother, that all her books were religious, Catholic religious, Santa Teresa, San Vicente, all the saints were in her shell. And some books of psychology that never I pay attention to it. And there was a title, especially that I'm going to say because really changed my life, that was You Can Heal Your Life, from Louise L. Hay. I don't know if you know this author. It's a North American author that is very known. And that, when I was in the sofa in the house of my mother, I was not thinking in God. A long time ago, I didn't pray anymore. I was there and I said, I need to change my life. I don't know what I to do, but I was feeling relief at least, that I knew that a change was coming. For good or for bad, it was not going to be the same, you know. And then I saw that book there that would say, You Can Heal Your Life. That was standing, almost going out of the shell. I said, that is that I want. And I went and I looked at the book and I started to read, and was like, it's a huge veil fall of my eyes. I understood, or I connected with that truth that I was reading about that we are, how Mony say, we are spiritual beings living a physical life. That the universe or the life is God. Call it whatever you want, but there is something greater that has created everything, that loves us amazingly, and that wants for us the best, and that there is a reason for everything. All is good. There is a reason for everything. The problem is that we don't understand what is happening. We don't remember who we really are. That we are in this life in a journey of self-knowledge, of growing, and to remember all these things that we have forget. And yeah, that was so many things, but especially, and one important thing is that I could change my life. I was not a victim of my life. I could change my life if I change my thoughts. That was so simple. Maybe I cannot change a situation, I cannot change a problem, but I can change how I think about that. That is in our hands, you know. And when you change what you think about that, all change. Immediately you can feel in peace. That is the first peace, the first step. And after, who knows? Then I could see, I can change my life. I can do whatever I want. I can only need to follow this new path that was not something intellectual. I was feeling in my whole body that was the truth. And still I feel today. After I had read so many books, I had followed so many paths, but all with that essential line that was in that book. And I could say that never before, that I can say that I had experimented that. I can say that life can change for the good, that what we put in our head is very important and is the basis to change your life and to live a happy life. I'm going to stop there because this is going to be so long. But the point is that was the thing that made me to start to look for yoga, meditation, to read many authors, and in some moment bring me to El Camino de Santiago in the north of Spain, where I was looking for what I do now. I know so much now. Now how I serve, what I do with my life in this point. No, now, okay, I know all this. Now what I do, and in that searching was where I found Mony at the end of the Camino, in the end of the world, Finisterre, when she had already the inspiration. She had already the inspiration to do this walk for peace to Jerusalem.
Now, why Rome to Jerusalem? When at first blush, or when you first think about it, you go, oh, okay, it's a very Christian, very religious route to walk, to choose Rome and to choose Jerusalem. But really for me, it was more than that. When I was on the Camino, like Alberto, I was walking going, what am I going to do with my life? I need direction. I need to find the next steps. And one day, sitting among some pilgrims, and this was back in 2001, before the Camino became the big thing that it is today, I heard some pilgrims speaking in English, which again was not as common on the Camino back then. And one of them was saying to the other, did you know that this Camino that we're walking is called the Way of the Sword? It is the place where you fight against your demons. You fight your personal fears, and you find your strength. That's the way of the sword that leads to Santiago. And then there's another path, a pilgrimage that goes to Rome, and that is called the way of the heart, the way of love, and not simply love among humans, but divine love, however you want to define that term divine. And then there's a pilgrimage that leads to Jerusalem, a path that goes there. And Jerusalem, that pilgrimage is called the way of the soul. And when I heard that, as I feel it right now, as soon as I heard those words, I felt like my entire body was on fire. It's like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk the way of the soul to Jerusalem. Because Jerusalem also held or holds a very special place in my heart because my family's from Lebanon. I grew up here in Canada. I was born in Canada, raised here. But really, our household was filled with discussion of what was going on in the Middle East. We still had family living in Lebanon. We had many relatives still there. And there was always this discussion. And it fascinated me, the friend one day who's your enemy the next, the complexities, the antiquity of the whole thing. And I never really questioned anything about peace because I grew up hearing and believing that if there's no justice, no peace. That was the rallying cry of that whole era. But when I began to go through kind of that whole questing, I started to ask myself, what is peace? What is justice? What do they really mean? Where do they come from? And how do you really create a peace that is lasting and not as something that is temporal? And those were the questions that were kind of going through my mind as I was walking. And then I heard those pilgrims say that Jerusalem is the ending point of the way of the soul. And it just felt in that moment like it was a calling. This is what I need. And I think it was maybe at that time too, I was seeking that peace myself. I was looking for it myself. And so the calling just kind of all seemed to come together. I'm going to walk to Jerusalem and I'm going to do it for peace. Now, this was I walked the Camino in the spring and summer of 2001. I met Alberto, it was around August of that year. We separated after we had met, and I had gone to do what I was doing. I was still in Europe, and then 9/11 hit. I was still traveling when 9/11 happened. And I was starting to kind of vacillate. When you get off the Camino and you start to think, I'm going to be walking, from Rome to Jerusalem. That's a long way. Okay, I'm a woman, I'm walking alone. How am I going to do this? Your fears. So all the fears start to kind of come into play. And I almost talked myself out of it. And when 9/11 happened, it just felt like the whole universe was saying, go do this. I thought, I don't have any answers for peace. I really don't know what it is. I'm still struggling with it myself, and I am no poster child for it. But I do know, and one of the greatest teachings of all, probably the philosophies, is if you want to change the world, you begin by changing yourself. Peace begins within. It is the inner world that creates the outer world. And so I thought, this is what I'm going to walk with that. And the Camino had given me the foundation to kind of say, okay, trust in this path. Let go of your plans. And I learned to let go. That wasn't an easy thing. I learned to not plan. I had to learn to just allow the way to lead me and be present to what was happening in every single moment. That in itself is a lifetime journey. I'm still doing it. It didn't end in Santiago, and it certainly didn't end in Jerusalem. Now, the physical aspects. I should say that when I had decided to walk, I said, okay, I'm going to do it. It was after September. It was mid to late September. I started researching the internet. I found one woman who had walked from The Hague to Jerusalem. I contacted her. She said, come see me. I was in Europe. Everything is close in Europe. I went and saw her. And as I was making my way to Rome to start walking, I made a phone call to a Camino friend who I had met who lived in Germany. And there, when I was visiting her, I saw Alberto. I didn't expect to see him there. Unbeknownst to me, they had started a relationship. And when I arrived, ready to go to Rome, this time he felt the calling. Not because of me. There was no attraction between us. No one believes that we were just walking as two companions, two pilgrims who really believed in the same thing. For me, it was about peace. For him, it was a journey that went beyond that. For him, he really looked at it as a spiritual quest, to really look and test all those great things that we read about in all the self-help and spirituality books. And so while he prepared, I started in Rome. I started walking alone. I was only alone for 10 days. I was walking on the side of the road, and this is what our journey looked like. Imagine walking, even here, like I wish we had some nice walkways like this. You're driving in your car, and you see two people walking with backpacks and, sticks on the side of the road. That's what we looked like. We walked around 15 to 20 kilometers a day. As we got stronger, and in the summertime, we could do up to 40, 45. And some days we did, but then your body is destroyed the next day, especially in the heat. Backpacks, my backpack weighed about 17 kilos. His was around 20, because in the beginning we were carrying tents for sleeping outside in case we needed them. If you add just a bottle of water, you don't think it's going to weigh a lot, a bottle of water. We had some cooking things for camping. All of that adds weight. And so eventually we got rid of all of that. We got rid of all those things because of a factor that we didn't count on. I had enough money and I had enough savings to be able to walk to Jerusalem, staying in hostels, campsites, hostels, nothing fancy, but I had enough savings to do that. When Alberto joined me, he said he didn't have enough savings to stay in Italy, especially where you cannot stay in a hostel for less than €50 a night at that time. And how much are you going to be spending before you get to Jerusalem? And we didn't know how long the journey was going to take us. We even, we did some quick calculations. In fact, that map that you're looking at was our map. We bought that one map of kind of Mediterranean Europe, and we kind of more or less gauged, okay, this is more or less the route we're going to take, 20 kilometers a day, more or less. We'll get there in 6 months. That was our original calculation. And then you realize you cannot possibly plan a pilgrimage because it's not about you, it's about the way that's leading you as you go along.
It's not about kilometers every day,
Come closer to
it's about the experience.
Yeah. And so he said he would like to do something that he heard a pilgrim had done on the Camino. This pilgrim had walked without any money, went to the church every single night, knocked on the door and said, I'm a pilgrim. I don't have any money. All I need is shelter for the night. I don't need food. I don't need anything. I just need a roof over my head. And for me, that was difficult to do because I didn't need money and I didn't need to ask for help. And if I wanted to walk with him, I had to make certain accommodations. And that was the first one. And many people will ask, how much money did you spend and how much money did you have and all that? How long did you save for? What ended up happening, to my great shock, was that we would find normally the house of the local priest. Most small towns have a bar and a church. And so we would find the church first, or go to the bar first, have a drink, ask for where the church is, where the priest lives, go to the house, knock on the door, and basically we learned to say in Italian first, we are pilgrims, and all we need is a roof over our head. We don't need anything more. Here are our passports. We showed our ID. And to my amazement, most times they opened up a hall that they had or a room that they weren't using. And they just said, you can sleep on the floor, which is exactly what we ended up doing. We slept on the floor. If they had tables like this, we would put them together and we would sleep on tables, chairs strung together, anything that would get us off the floor, because many times they didn't always turn on the heat in the winter. And so we slept in our backpacks and slept wherever we were given shelter. In the backpacks and the sleeping bags. That would be harder in the sleeping bag.
For another part, too, she resists to this idea because we are not really, at that time, not now either, we are not really religious people. So we are more spiritual people. So we believe that all religions are common, so our sisters. So even the atheists, atheists for us is a belief system of what is this, who we are. Then we are all brothers trying to figure what is happening, but we didn't want, especially her, she didn't want to be noticed like the Catholic, no. Then it was she fight against this idea, but I told her we can go to anywhere, not only churches, wherever place is receive us, we will be open. We clarify that we are pilgrims walking for peace, and after all we want peace. Then why not? That was my point.
And peace is universal. Yeah. It's a universal principle. It doesn't matter which religion or which philosophy you subscribe to. And so that was possibly the biggest accommodation that I had to make. And also, keep in mind back then, there was no route. The Camino is very well marked with yellow arrows. This isn't like that. We're walking on the side of the road. We look at the map every day, trying to figure out where the next stop is going to be, and then trying to find accommodations. And so every day we were going pretty much on faith, going trusting that everything is going to be okay, and that if someone slams the door on your face, that's okay. It just means that you're not meant to be here. You're meant to be someplace else. So all these spiritual principles that we talk about, non-judging, being present in the moment, all these great teachings, being love, those were all put to the test every single day. And the belief that was my personal journey was learning to let go of all of those limitations, to let go of those judgments that I had about what I thought a priest should do. Because in my mind, if I knocked on the door of a priest or a monastery, or if I knocked on a convent door, it was their obligation to take me in, because otherwise, isn't that what the collar and all this suggests, that you're supposed to help me? I had to learn that first and foremost, they are human beings. They are people like you and me. And they have their fears, and they have their frailties. And wearing a collar or any kind of uniform, whatever you want to call it, carries no obligation to help. And so that was a very big thing, to let go of those expectations that I had. And just say, okay, if it's not here, it's somewhere else. And the most amazing thing happened. I don't know if you've noticed in some of the pictures. Alberto, we cut out some signs to say in the language of every country that we are walking for peace. And what that did, of course, is make us into billboards, walking billboards. And people would, more often than not, stop their cars and ask us, who are you and what are you doing? They'd invite us to have a drink in a bar. They'd invite us into their homes to sleep. That was probably the most amazing thing, that to bring us into their homes and to offer us a hot meal or a hot shower, which was beyond, that was the greatest gift you could get. I remember the first time, and that was in Padua, that this woman invited us to sleep in her home, and she offered to wash our clothes. And we hadn't had our laundry done in 2 months. We just washed by hand. And you hang it on the heater, if there was a heater, to dry, and then you continue on. So, when you smell that soap, it's like perfume. It's the sweetest thing to have clothes on. And so what amazed us and amazed me as we were walking throughout this journey is the level of outpouring that people had in trying to help us. Now, they may not have agreed with us, because we only said we are trying to do our part for peace. And we would hear every political theory you can imagine and every conspiracy idea. No, it's not about that, it's about this, and you're all naive, and that's fine. And they'll say to us, nobody has ever tried to hurt you here. And we'd say, well, no. Everybody warned us about everybody else. In Albania especially, that was the hugest thing. Don't trust any Albanians. Don't talk to them. You can't trust anybody. But you're Albanian. I'm talking to you. But you can't trust any other Albanians. You can trust me, but you can't trust them. And so a lot of the journey was walking through fears and walking through judgments, and trying to come to that place of understanding that what connects us and what unites us is so much stronger than what divides us. And that if we can walk with a heart that is open and with a heart that is loving, we are able to attract so much grace and so much beauty into our lives. Now, that's not to say it was all roses and it was all wonderful and grand and beautiful. It was difficult. There were some very challenging moments that we had to go through. But on the whole, never did anybody try to hurt us. Nobody tried to stop and take money from us. We had much money, but take money from us or take anything from us. And many people will say, oh, you're just lucky. That's just luck, That we walked 13 months in 13 different countries, and it was all luck. I don't know. I would tend to say that it's not luck. This is, I think, really essentially where the rubber meets the road. When you're talking about the spiritual quest and the spiritual journey, are you going to believe the story that you have been told about this world in which you live in this so-called reality, or are you going to choose to look at the world through other eyes? That's really the essence of what is the inner journey for us. It's to believe in a world that you can't touch yet, to see it, to visualize it, to feel it, and then work towards creating it, even when reality and everything that surrounds you tells you you're an idiot for doing that. Because don't you see the war and don't you see this? That is the inner journey. That is the quest, is to continue to say, no. There is another world, and I am choosing to see this, and I'm choosing to surround myself with people who I know are of same mind and who are also building this world that I wish to see. Now, I can continue talking for a long time, but we're going to we prefer to take your questions. So we're going to just talk, maybe sum it up by just giving you a few of the lessons that we have learned from this journey. You want to start or want me to?
You can start. I think
Okay.
the more important lesson for me that I believed before, but for this journey made me still to a bigger believer, if we could say that, is that we are not alone. And there is something great, whatever you want to call it, even if you want to say that it's your own inner wisdom, whatever you want to call it, there is something great that is with us all the time. And when you trust in that and you surrender to that higher wisdom, things work miraculously, magically, I will say. And we had so many experiences about that. We had many small miracles, things that happen, manifestations of things that we wanted that was almost impossible to happen in that moment. And there they were. And so many angels, human angels and other kind too, that make us to do this. But because in first place, I think we believe it. If you don't believe, you cannot see. And that is one of another of the big things that we want to share today.
You know, when we arrived in Jerusalem, we had been keeping track of people who had helped us. And many of them had said to us, just send me a quick postcard when you get to Jerusalem and just let me know that you arrived well. Some people even gave us, on a more kind of touching note, we carried with us the photos of some loved ones who had passed on, and their families who would never make it to Jerusalem said to us, can you bring this photo with you and find an appropriate place for it in Jerusalem? One man, it was in Croatia, gave me a candle and said, can you light this candle for me when you arrive in Jerusalem? It was like plastered, it was like flat because I carried it for 7 months, but it made it, and I lit the candle for him as promised. And so we carried with us also many prayers, many hopes, many beautiful energies that also were accompanying us. We sent 250 postcards. When we arrived in Jerusalem, we took a picture of us. I think it's on the back of the book, of us with Jerusalem with the Dome of the Rock behind us. And we made that into like a card, and we shipped it off to over 200 people. And so we didn't walk alone. We had so many helping physical hands helping us here as well. In my grandest visions and grandest dreams, I imagine myself, arriving in Jerusalem. We're going to have a huge peace march, because I still believe that, people can do something for peace. You can just get out there and action. I was a very action-driven person. We're going to arrive there. We're going to have, all the different religions walking together, different, the Israelis and the Palestinians all holding hands. I had this beautiful image in my mind of what it was going to be like when we arrived in Jerusalem. But when I got there, I still had much to learn and much to digest, really. I hadn't digested what had happened for the past year. It was just another day. It was just another day, another beautiful church, another beautiful place to get to. But I slowly came to realize that it was never really even about Jerusalem. It never was about that at all. It was about embarking on the journey. I needed the dream. I needed the dream of the Ithaca. It was my Ithaca, so that I could embark on the journey, because it was in the journey where I was learning. It was in the journey where I was facing my fears. It was in the journey where I was healing those parts that needed to be healed, because in doing that, I'm creating more space for peace, for love, for compassion. And when I have that more firmly grounded within me, then I am able to come to the world in action that is inspired from a different place. I am able to come to the table listening for ideas that maybe, had I been filled with anger and revenge and injustice, I never would have been able to hear, and possibilities that never would have revealed myself had the heart been so closed. So that was probably the biggest lesson for someone who was very action inspired and just leaping into action, is to say, action is good, action is necessary, but it has to come from a place that is deeply grounded from a heart that is very deeply grounded in love and in compassion. Gandhi taught the same thing. His greatest movement, his Satyagraha movement, was about the soul force, the love force. He was trying to get that into people first before they went out and started to act. And and the last thing, that was what Alberto had said about believing is seeing. There's a Latin phrase which is credendo vides. And credendo vides means when you believe, you see, not the other way around. It is when you're able to believe in this world that you are envisioning, you're able to believe in this peace and brotherhood that we have among all of us. You believe in that, then you are able to see it. Then you become the masters of your destiny and the creators of this peace we all wish to see in the world. And that's it for now. We'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Don't be afraid to and don't be afraid to offend. You can ask any question. We are accustomed to. You mean how two different? Yeah, well, there are many ways to call things, and I use a lot symbolism and metaphors. Even when Mony and me had the same essential belief, because we had read many of the same books, maybe I go deeper in the fact that the power of mind or of our thoughts can go very far, and we can create even miracles. For me, I understood that was Jesus or another masters did. In some way, they had gone to beyond of the common knowledge that science had, or the science at that time, or the wisdom at that time had, and they could develop the for me the God that we had inside, or that power that had created the universe and the stars. For me, I call that in a symbolic way, because how you explain that to anybody that you know, I call that the way of the wizard. And it's that Francis referred. I think all we are in some way wizards in potential, but we don't know. So the image that you had about yourself, about life, about the universe is what you live. The more that you believe in something else, the more that you develop maybe that hidden, let's go to say, powers, or simply the potential that all we have, And that was the Mony maybe was not too far in that point. Still, I believe that, Francis, today is something that is that, and thanks to that, we saw many things that I manifest, many things that we couldn't believe in with a normal state or belief system, in some way, I think we unite because we help each other to grow in many ways. Things that she believed, that she understood, we shared, and that was the point. I don't know if you want to say something else.
I think possibly for me, we kind of shared the same spirituality. But he kind of, as he was saying, kind of was going beyond into territories that for me were a little bit weird. More esoteric, like ascended masters, speaking about, other beings from other planets, other worlds, other intelligences that were coming. And that was just, I wasn't there. That was just too out there for me. I was just trying to, find my spirituality and try to find a way to use it, to make it real for me, rather than going and investigating into things that I think have had no end. Back then I thought, this is endless. You can so-and-so this entity, and then that entity has this thing to say. It's like, but then what are you going to live? Like, whose truth are you going to live at the end? And for me, I may have read fewer things, but I was trying to put into practice those few things that I had read about. And I wasn't very open to sharing my spirituality. That was probably one of the biggest conflicts between us. I didn't want to go around talking openly about this unless somebody asked me specifically. I think it's maybe because I'm Canadian, it's a very polite thing to do. You don't just go out there and say, hi, let me tell you about all the magic and the miracles that are going on in my life. I kind of wait until I'm asked, maybe. Whereas he felt more confident just talking about really what was going on in our pilgrimage and all these little things that were making it possible. The spiritual, the esoteric, all these forces, those invisible forces that were kind of with us as we were walking. It was a huge source of conflict. Because I saw my life work maybe when I arrived in Jerusalem to find an NGO and work for peace there, and I didn't want to be connected to any one philosophy or religion especially. And so I had to overcome a lot of kind of my own fears about what other people will think once they hear me speak about my beliefs.
You didn't want to be,
And to be labeled, yeah. Labeled still do not like labels. So that's what that happened there. Yes.
Coming from Canada, United States, where you managed to, I have a nephew that has couch surfing down to a science, but not at your level, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't think here the way you could kind of stop by and walk into the priest place that stay overnight. I get President European, I think probably a bit friendlier than we are here.
You know,
I would like to say something.
okay. No, I was just going to say, I think there's a couple of things maybe. One is that I think the whole concept of pilgrimage is much more readily accepted. In Europe, pilgrims have been walking from their homes to all kinds of sacred spots all over. And so I think the churches have a tradition, and the monasteries and the convents have a tradition of taking in pilgrims and helping them on their way. It's not an unusual thing to find a pilgrim off doing what they're doing. But I think I know what you're going to say.
We found in our way to Jerusalem, we found different pilgrims too, that they were doing the same that us, majority in bikes. Not so many, but some of them. And I remember especially one that said that he had gone to many churches, he never was accepted. That was in Turkey, no? Where we met him. But he was, you talk with him, and he was in the bike for peace too, he said, but he was talking about fights, that he had fight with somebody, that he had this problem, and he whatever. And this, we come back to the same point that we were talking a moment ago. We were walking always with the idea that people is good, and that we are going to bring, when in the meetings that we have, we are going to meet people good, people is in the same line of us, and the universe is helping, we are not alone. If you don't go with that kind of perspective, it's very difficult that you find. You are going to find people that are not in that way, and after all, you are with that sense of injustice, that this is not fair, that this is not, and this is going to complicate the things even more. So one thing that made possible this, that we did, for me that is no doubt today, is that we had a good frame of mind, a good frame of mind. We were positive people. In some moments, no. In some moments, in the moments that we were emotionally down, was the real problems that we have. We suffer, but was for emotional problems. When we feel that we were not worthy, that we feel that we were not doing enough, that we were doing a crazy thing, especially in Turkey, when we didn't trust so much the tourist place, that they only wanted to sell. That kind of thinking, that was the really affect us, but we didn't have problems with people really. But when we started to think in that way, we were seeing more that in our reality. The more that we thought in that way, more we connected. In the moment that we cleaned that, all was wonderful, and the experience were amazing.
Yes.
What are you doing now? How does this connect with your years in Apology?
Well, after we finished our walk, I went to Spain to meet his family. He came to Canada to meet my family. Oh yeah, we fell in love along the way. Oh yeah, that little thing. But it didn't happen until Greece, which is like 6 months in. And again, nobody believes that. He was like more like a thorn in my side more than anything else. And the same. Like I'm sure I was the same way for him, because we didn't agree. And in fact, we talked about separating during our walk more than once. And then we thought, but we're walking for peace. And how can we talk about peace when we can't even figure it out between the two of us? And so that was like, okay, the commitment to try again, try to find the common ground, try to accommodate the other. And so after our walk, we came back here to Canada. I became unexpectedly, happily pregnant. Our daughter was born exactly 1 year to the day that he and I, 2 years to the day, that he and I started walking together. We began walking December 5, 2001. She was born December 5, 2003. So we like to think that this little pilgrim family has now expanded it a little bit. We have one more pilgrim walking with us. So we lived in Spain for 7 years, and really the first in his hometown of Cadiz in southern Spain. And I'd say the first couple of years were spent trying to digest. You really can't, you don't know what's happened to you. All you know is that you're like a fish out of water. I didn't fit in back here, and when I came back to Canada, with my family especially, there was the feeling of, okay, now she's done her crazy walk. Now she's gonna come back to normal. She's gonna, get a normal job. She's gonna get a house. She's gonna get married. She's gonna fit back inside of the box. And I couldn't do that. And I felt in Spain that there was a little bit more of a laissez-faire attitude. Just live and let live, and everything is okay. And it was what I needed. I think what we both needed to be able to kind of slowly digest and try to make sense of what had happened to us. And it was in the journey of, because people wanted to hear about what had happened, and so we thought about putting together the book. And the process of going through our diaries again, because we both kept very extensive diaries, really helped us to kind of begin to come to terms with what had happened to us. And the funny thing was, as we were writing the book, we had the same arguments that we had when we were walking. We would argue about the same things. We would argue, it's like, but I think we needed to argue again from a distance to kind of come to another resolution, to another place of acceptance and peace of what the whole issue, and understanding of what that issue was about. And so we first began by writing the book of our journey, and Alberto is a very talented artist, and so we have both made the decision to dedicate our lives to this continuing journey of sharing this beautiful energy that we feel has graced us, and that is the essence of who we all are. So he is an illustrator. We've written an illustrated children's book. He has many paintings that hopefully we'll be able to exhibit very shortly here in Ottawa. And so we continue to find ways to bring out or to manifest out into the world all these lovely, lovely creations. And this is what we do. We speak, we have our books, we have our daughter who keeps our hands quite full. We came back to Canada, 3 years ago?
Yes.
Yep, 3 years. 2010, Christmas time, and yeah. So we've just been back in Canada and enjoying this lovely, lovely Ottawa weather. That's a great question. This is when everything that you believe in is put to the test. Are you going to trust and walk with the same openness and trust, knowing that this area that you've walked through has just come out of war? Because we saw the remnants in some parts of Croatia, and Albania. We saw the tanks, the tanks that were on the side of the road. We saw the bullets on the side of holes, like in Dubrovnik, for example. That hadn't been done. And so you're reminded that this was a place that had just come out of civil war. And even the people themselves will say, you can't trust, you're going into Macedonia, Montenegro, and Serbia. You don't know what atrocities they've committed against us. And then they tell you all the atrocities, putting even more fear into you. And so the hardest part of that journey was to say that's their experience. And their experience does not necessarily mean it's going to be my experience. And that's very difficult because, like I said, you're in that environment of they're trying to warn you from the best intentions that, be careful. But at the same time, they're putting their fear into you. It's not my fear of them. It's their fear of them. And so the hardest part for me, and that was put to the test in Albania, for me especially, and it was my personal low point kind of on the inner journey, because from the moment we started in Italy, they kept saying, avoid Albania. Albania is a madhouse. The dictatorship just fell, and all you see there is chaos. People and the mafia is everywhere. Police, you can't trust the police. Don't ever ask them for help. Everybody's going to steal you blind. It's like, by the time I got to Albania, I was looking for ways around Albania. But again, in Albania, the people were wonderful. The people were like you and me. The connection with the individuals was just fine. The police even stopped. When the police first stopped us the first time, I freaked out. But he only stopped us to say, just making sure that your papers are okay, and I'm just calling the other police officers to let them know you're on this road. And by the way, don't trust Albanians. that was the funniest thing. It was like, oh my God. And so the hardest part is that, not falling into other people's realities, other people's fears, other people's conceptions of the world. That was the hardest part.
Yeah, but it's true that all that helped us to understand the conflicts and to understand the people in both sides. So then make us more aware of what is really the conflict, and how the people suffer with all these problems, and how there is no one that is all right and another is all wrong. There is right and wrong. There is the point. This helped us to understand, but for another part, we needed to put some kind of space. Is to understand, to open yourself to the another, but trying to remember who you are and where you are, because it's easy to be sucked to that kind of negativity in some way, Then I think that was a good lesson. I learned at the end of the journey, I learned what was the conflict in Jerusalem. When I went out, I didn't know. I knew there was a war, but I didn't know what was. I didn't care before until that time. And all this journey helped me to understand the conflict that is there.
It's really hard not to get sucked into other people's dramas, all of it.
Good, but
yeah.
You need to be centered in your truth,
Yeah. Yes. It's after 2:00, just so that you all know. Like, we're happy to stay, but I just want to be respectful of your time. That's all.
But two questions. As you walked about 20 kilometers a day. That's about 4 or 5 hours a day. Is that right?
Yeah, it depended on the day.
At
yeah.
the beginning, after we walk more.
Yeah.
And did you, as you walked, did you sing? Did you meditate? Did you pray? Did you talk? Were you silent?
Great questions.
Fill the time.
Yeah, that's a
Good question. We normally walked like this. I was in front, obviously without the boots.
Because
but
she cannot see the people behind me.
So I always walked in front of him. And we walked in silence because we're on the side of the road. The odd time that we were on like a small country lane or something, we could walk side by side. But mostly it was one in front of the other, and you're paying attention to the cars. Obviously, you're trying not to get hit. For me, it's funny, the most curious of songs that pop into your head. Amazing Grace, whose words I don't know. I only know one small, part of it, was the song that kept repeating over and over in my head. I would just hum it, and that would be the one thing that would just continually be in my mind.
Yeah, positive things, spiritual songs, positive songs.
You grew up
But I like to sing. When I grow in a church, then I love to sing. And, I think music and songs help us to connect with that kind of energy. I think it's energy too. And then the more happy that you feel, the better that the circumstance go. Is what I believe. Then, I sung a lot. I sang a lot, yeah.
And there's also a moment.
We pray in our own way.
Yeah.
So we communicate with life, with the members. I talk to a lot, of course, and every day, every night, and meditation. And I had my walks when I arrived to some place. I always went to get a walk 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, we'd arrive after a long day of walking. He'd go for a walk.
Because to clear my mind, to connect with the life. For me, I don't know. I like it to talk with the moon, but the moon was a symbol of the universe. So and that kind of.
And after a while, the more that you're, the more that you walk, after a while, you forget your body. Your body is almost absent, and you're kind of in a different space. And it's a very hard feeling to describe. But you're walking, and you're aware of your body, but at the same time, you're beyond your body. And you just feel that you're just connected with everything. You're there, and you're not there. And your mind is at peace. And those moments happen especially... I would say they happen throughout the walk, but I'd say in the latter part of the journey, they happen more and more. Because, your body's accustomed, you're just moving. The body is just moving on its own. And then your mind is able to just kind of escape, and you're not there. You still have to be aware, but you're not really there. So it's a strange kind of sensation.
It's a meditation.
It's a walking meditation. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. How many pairs of shoes we wore out? Believe it or not, only 2. I had my original pair of boots that I started walking with from Rome, and they lasted until the beginning of Turkey. And in Turkey, with the heat especially, you can't really walk with heavier boots. And so we found, there are so many craftsmen there, a gentleman who made leather boots, but a soft upper, like a very soft leather boot with a not too thick of a sole so that my foot could bend. That was my biggest thing. For footwear, I preferred natural, everything natural materials, leather, wool socks. Those were what helped me most with blisters, because that was my biggest thing walking was blisters. So only two. That pair in Turkey got me to Jerusalem, and then it was no more boots for a long time. Sandals.
For me too. I had a trekking boots and Gore-Tex, this material that breathe. And in Turkey, I think too, they broke finally. And I buy running shoes, high tops running shoes, and that was so comfortable. For the asphalt, for the road, it's great. If you are going for the mountains or you are going for path, maybe it's better the trekking, but for the road, that we walk for the side of the road, is the running shoes are the best.
Yeah. And I'll mention one last thing. There are, back then, we would just followed whatever we followed, but there is now a more concerted effort to recreate and mark the pilgrimage paths that lead to Rome and that lead to Jerusalem. And so there are volunteers, many of them are actually academics and researchers who know the itineraries. They read whatever ancient texts of the pilgrims who walked, say, from Rome to Jerusalem, taking certain paths. And now they're trying to get the GPS coordinates so that those paths can actually be marked. It's not the same, but but they have the coordinates so that you can start marking them. And there are volunteers who are now taking those coordinates and then walking in different sections, different countries, and marking them with stickers. It's being called the Jerusalem Way. The Jerusalem Way. If you visit my website or on Facebook, if you have Facebook and you look for me, I'm trying to kind of be the contact point for the Canadian. For Canada, so that any questions you may have about making a pilgrimage to Jerusalem or to Rome, I have maps, and I can put you in touch with the people who can maybe help you with your planning. So,
and I think Mony will say the same, that we believe organized a journey, a travel like that is good. To try to have a phone or whatever can be good, but really there is something special in have the less possible things organized, because you can see more the magic. You can see how things develop and even it's good to find yourself in some moment that you don't know what to do, and even to feel a little the fear, and to trust and to see how things go from that point. Then I think I understand pilgrims that go, they need to be very prepared to, the first time or the second is normal, but I think little by little it's good to trust and to go beyond the limits and to see what can come from that.
To see where the way leads you.
What?
Sorry?
I had not a cell phone, nothing.
I had a cell phone. I did have a cell phone. Back then, it was still the newest thing. It was the Nokia communicator. So it was a phone, and it had like Microsoft Word on it and Excel, and I used that as my diary because it was less to carry. He carried books, I carried my little communicator, and that was my diary. And I kept track of where we went and the kilometers and all that. It was, my Microsoft person was not completely gone. So, well, thank you all so much for your time. We so appreciate it. Thank you.
Ellen Bell asked me if I would thank you, and I will do my best, because I think that was one of the most remarkable presentations that I've been to ever. Why do I say that? You started on this particular journey having already done some traveling. You had the courage to break with a lifestyle that you had before. You embarked upon the Camino de Santiago. You met at Finisterre. You were preparing yourselves. You were well prepared for your, in my opinion, for your walk from Rome to Jerusalem. But you had the confidence, and you've had the confidence and courage to share this with us, not as a walking tour, but as a deep deep personal journey. And just amazing. And I don't know what else to say other than on behalf of the group here to thank you profoundly for sharing this with us. And on behalf of the group, I wish you peace, love, and amazing grace, which you have earned.